Hey everyone, Tankenstein here. In this video, I'll be reviewing the Al-Khalid-I, though I'll probably just refer to it as the Al-Khalid throughout this review. This is a currently 10.7 BR rank 7 premium medium/main battle tank in the Chinese Ground Forces tech tree. The pack that it comes in currently costs $69.99 USD when not on sale, and comes with 2,500 Golden Eagles and 20 days of premium time. With that said, in this video, I'll be going over everything that you need to know about this tank, including its stats, how it plays, I'll go over its strengths and weaknesses, I'll give it some scores in several key areas, and then I'll give my final recommendation and if I feel that this vehicle is worth purchasing or not. With that said, if you like this kind of video, please consider subscribing, especially if you like your social credit score, but without further ado, let's get into it. Now to start, I'll place its stat card here on the side of the screen. Important things to note are its armament, its power to weight ratio, and its reload rate. And now, just before we get into how it plays, just one thing to note. This vehicle has a 1,000 Golden Eagle digital camo that you can't scale up or down, or change the quality or rotation of. It feels like they just pasted some sprites from Space Invaders on a desert camo and sold it for $6.60 USD. I've heard that this is the pre-order skin, which is cool that you can buy it after the fact, but it feels a little minimalist for the cost, but still, it's a kind of cool camo. Regardless, now for how it plays. Think any normal MBT, and they are probably a good mix of survivability, mobility, and armament. Now add a bit to the armament and remove some survivability, and that's the Al-Khalid. This vehicle has a fantastic cannon and APF SDS combination in the DTC-10-125 that goes through nearly 580 millimeters of armor at its current BR of just 10.7. You typically don't see those figures until you're in 11 BR territory. This will allow you to go through most tank armor with ease, even some protected areas with ERA and composites. This is a tremendous advantage that, when combined with its excellent Gen 3 thermals, will allow you to effectively snipe any enemy from long distances. It is genuinely shocking sometimes how good of a sniper this vehicle is, but it still has just middling gunner's optics with just 10 times zoom. These aren't terrible, but they're about average, if that. Still, in my experience, that is just good enough to be able to get snipes on even the largest maps, such as Pradesh. The mobility on this vehicle, while not the best at its BR, is still very good and can just about keep up with the fastest tanks, such as the lightest Abrams and Leopard 2 variants. This is still more than sufficient mobility to be able to base cap, flank, and get to whatever point on the map that you want with ease. The only real stinker on the Al-Khalid is its survivability. While it has fairly good FY2 ERA, it only covers most of the upper glacis on this vehicle and the front of the turret cheeks. Aside from some ERA blocks placed on the rear of the turret on the slat armor, which is of questionable effectiveness, that's basically all that this vehicle has. It has some composites, but they are fairly thin and only cover part of the upper glacis and frontal turret cheeks. That's it. Because of this, you really can't frontline with this vehicle. Unlike vehicles like the T90A, T80, and Leopard 2, the Al-Khalid will rarely be able to survive a hit on any part of its body outside of being shot with autocannons. As such, I would advise to flank, snipe, base cap, and support with this vehicle. Brawling and frontlining are out of the question. The reload rate is just a touch too low, and the armor is totally insufficient for activities that pit you directly against a typical enemy at this tier. In that way, at least, this vehicle almost kind of plays like a light tank. Now, the armor can and will occasionally allow you to survive a few hits, but the amount of survived hits with the Al-Khalid will likely be noticeably lower than with similar BR MBTs for almost all players using it. The Al-Khalid isn't nearly as weakly armored as, let's say, a wheeled tank destroyer, but a typical MBT, this is not. Now, with that said, let's get into its strengths and weaknesses, and first for its strengths. While not amazing, the turret traverse rate can be between 21 and 30 degrees per second depending on crew skill. This is fairly usable and at the upper end is fairly good. Second, while the reload rate is just meh, it at least guarantees a 7.1 second reload rate barring the autoloader's destruction. Third, this vehicle has a fairly low profile and overall size. For its fourth strength, it has very good mobility with a 25-to-1 horsepower per ton power to weight ratio. Max speed is also very good at 70 kilometers per hour and also has a very good 32 km per hour reverse speed. Fourth, the FY2 ERA is fairly good and covers a large portion of the upper glacis and front of the turret. It also sits on some of the slat armor around the rear of the turret, which may protect against some random shots. Unfortunately, this ERA is currently modeled as very large blocks, which means that a large amount of the ERA will be destroyed on hit rather than a small precise block like you see with other vehicles. Beyond this vehicle has a top-mounted HMG for destroying aircraft, lightly armored vehicles, and of course, tank tracks. Seventh, This vehicle has Gen 3 thermals for the commander and gunner, which is amazing. Beyond this, the Al-Khalid features an excellent 125mm cannon with excellent ammunition options, especially the DTC-10 125 APF SDS with over 570mm of armor pen at max. At 10.7 BR, that is easily among the best. There's even a variable fuse HE shell for destroying aircraft, and even some pesky enemies that might be hiding behind cover. And finally, this vehicle features premium RP and SL bonuses. Now for its weaknesses. The Al-Khalid has poor cannon depression of only -6 degrees. Cannon elevation is also mediocre at just 14 degrees. Second, while the autoloader can be a good thing, it only has an unchanging reload rate of 7.1 seconds. Third, this vehicle lacks ERA on the edge of the upper glacis, which is something that its brother the MBT 2000 has. For its fourth weakness, the Al-Khalid only has 3 crew members, which severely hurts survivability. Beyond this vehicle also has a very cramped turret, which also hurts survivability. For its sixth weakness, the Al-Khalid features a carousel-type ammo rack for the autoloader, which will annihilate the tank if hit. This is basically the entire floor of the turret, which is a huge area and is easy to hit, with additional ammo sitting in the rear of the turret and hull that has no blowout panels. Beyond this, the composite armor on this vehicle is thin and doesn't protect anywhere outside of the front of the turret cheeks and part of the upper glacis. And finally, the Al-Khalid has a poorly armored cannon breach area with no composites, no ERA, and relatively thin metal armor. This is worse than in similar BR Western tanks due to the size of the weak spot and again, total lack of composites. Now with that said, let's get into how I score this vehicle. And first for armament, I give it an 8.25 out of 10. The extremely powerful 125mm cannon mixed with the excellent DTC-10 125 APF SDS and other versatile ammo options, such as again the DTB-12 125HE, makes this an extremely potent vehicle, especially at 10.7 BR. When you combine the excellent 3rd gen thermal sights, it becomes clear that the Al-Khalid tank is a fantastic vehicle in terms of armament. Heck, there's even a nice top-mounted HMG that gives this vehicle a little something extra. Really, the only things keeping me from giving the Al-Khalid a higher score are the middling gunner sights of just 10 times zoom and a relatively slow reload rate of just 7.1 seconds. Other than that, I really can't fault the Al-Khalid on anything major. Sure, the autoloader reload time is a bit rough, but it's still more or less a guaranteed reload rate, unlike tanks that use a manual loader. Now for mobility, I give this a 7.5 out of 10. While its power to weight ratio is great, it almost surprisingly isn't the best around this BR. Vehicles like the premium Leopard 2A4 and M1 KVT have about a 10% higher power to weight ratio. Still, the mobility on the Al-Khalid is more than sufficient and is good enough, in my opinion, to be considered excellent. Maybe it's just me, but the Al-Khalid feels easier to hit its top speed of 70 km per hour than even the Leopard 2 and Abrams with their top speed, despite having a lower power to weight ratio compared to them. The Al-Khalid will be able to get you anywhere on the map about as quickly as any other faster MBT currently around its BR, possibly even quicker if you're a good enough driver. I guess the ultimate judgment on mobility in War Thunder is if it helps or hurts you, and with the Al-Khalid, it helps you a ton. Now for survivability, I give this vehicle a lowly 3.35 out of 10. For an MBT, the Al-Khalid has poor survivability. Between its thin composite armor, small amounts of composite armor, cramped interior, 3 crew members, ammo carousel, and limited amounts of areas with the otherwise good but not amazing FY2 ERA, the Al-Khalid is as much of a glass tank as you can get for an MBT at this BR. Whereas the armament has everything good working towards it, its survivability on this tank is largely the opposite. Don't get me wrong, the FY2 is good ERA, and can be especially potent covering the areas that are protected by composite armor, such as the front of the turret cheeks, but those areas are few and far between. Relative to other MBTs, the Al-Khalid has among the worst survivability in game, at least relative to BR. It can still take hits, but armor just isn't thick enough or plentiful enough to be considered regularly effective. Even though it might seem low, the 3.25 out of 10 in this category that I gave this vehicle might be a bit generous, at least when comparing to other MBTs. Now overall, I give this vehicle a 6.75 out of 10. The Al-Khalid is a very offensively minded vehicle, with excellent armament and great mobility, though is extremely flawed in terms of survivability. I know the 6.75 out of 10 is slightly higher than the average of all 3 scores put together, but survivability at this BR isn't as meaningful, as most battles are point, click, kill, whereas armor matters a bit more at lower BRs. Still, the armor, or lack thereof, on the Al-Khalid is unforgiving even at this BR. I've heard some rumors that the Al-Khalid in-game isn't 100% accurate, accurate as to how it is in real life, and is supposed to have something like a 6.5 second reload. If that ever happens in War Thunder, I would easily give this vehicle a 7 out of 10 overall if everything else remains the same. Until then, it's still great, but it has its flaws. Now, do I recommend the purchase of the Al-Khalid? For most people, surprisingly, yes. If you can keep yourself alive by means of staying out of sight of enemies, such as by sniping, the Al-Khalid will be an amazing vehicle. It is among the most powerful tanks at this BR in terms of armament, which is saying something. Not only that, but it sees a large amount of down tiers, at least in my experience, and should continue to do so as long as it stays at 10.7 BR. This makes its power nearly unrivaled in many of the matches that it will be in. But because of the weak armor and great mobility, mixed with its excellent armament, the Al-Khalid is a vehicle that should really only be used by somewhat experienced players. I feel that a lot of new players will get frustrated very easily and very often while using the Al-Khalid, as it cannot survive hits easily. A vehicle like the ZTZ-99AP, however, is currently the same rank as the Al-Khalid and is much better protected relative to BR, while still having a very good armament for its BR. As such, while I really like the Al-Khalid because it is an absolutely maniacal mix of speed and armament, I can really only recommend it to those who have already played at top tier for some time and in some way. For those new to top tier, I'd still recommend the ZTZ-99AP over the Al-Khalid, as its survivability is much better and is just an overall more balanced vehicle, really only suffering in terms of mobility. Otherwise, I genuinely like the Al-Khalid. I give it my recommendation for players with at least some top tier experience and my Tankenstein seal of approval. The Al-Khalid is a load of fun and is a great vehicle. You absolutely need to know what you're doing in order to minimize its poor survivability so that you can live long enough to make the most use out of its excellent cannon as possible. Now with that said, thank you all so much for watching. If you don't mind, please consider liking this video as well as commenting on it and subscribing to my channel. Let me know what you guys think about the Al-Khalid and of this video in the comments below. But either way, thanks again, I'll see you all on the other side. Take care everyone.